Okay, what you need to turn to now is one of the areas, the last areas we have that only has 3. Okay, and so we're working with writing quadratic equations. The first one is having a, whoa, that's a big marker. Having a vertex. Oh, come on, erase it. Okay, what you need to do now is find one of the last areas that has 3 sections. It might even be the last area, and we're going to write quadratic equations. The first one we're going to do is we're going to write quadratic equations when there's a vertex and a point. Remember, the vertex is hk, the point is xy, and then we're using these equations. And so I plug in my, first thing it says is my y. I wonder if I can highlight, probably not. So I'm going to plug in this y right here. And so that's where this came from, 11 equals a, and then x is 6. And then, so that's the x and the y. And then let's change colors let's do green, for h and k. H and k, I plug in my h and I plug in my k. And then I do my order of operations. 6 minus 4 is 2. And then I do 2 squared. A common mistake I was seeing people do 4 plus 3. But really it should just be 4a plus 3. So I minus 3 on both sides. And I get 8. And then you divide by 4 and you get a is 2. And then I plug it back in. But I also plug in the h and the k value. Okay? So that's when you're given a vertex and a point. If you are given just two intercepts and a point, remember your intercepts are p and q, and your point is x and y, and I plug it into this equation right here. Pretty arrow. And so my y is -1, so it's -1 equals a, because I don't know what a is. My x is 4 minus my first p, and then, or minus my p, and then my x is 4 minus my q. I do my operations. 4 minus 2 gives me 2. 4 minus 3 is 1, and 2 times 1 is 2. So then I divide both sides by 2, and I get -1/2. And then I also plug in my p and my q. You guys did not like this when we first started it, but we've done enough of them that as long as you practice them, you should be okay at them. But if you avoid them, then you will probably continue to get them wrong. All right, the last thing is something that we didn't really do. We did best fit instead, but I want you to be able to do this too. If you have 3 points, what you do is you hit stat and you go to edit and you put your x's in L1 and you put your y's in L2. And then you go back to stat and you go over to calculate and you choose number 5, which is quad reg. And from there, it's going to give you the a squared plus bx plus c. And you plug in what a is, what b is, and what c is. Okay, the last one we're looking at is we're looking at factoring. And I don't remember if we've split this one up. Somehow I did not take pictures of this, so I'm going to kind of make it up as I go. But when you factor, the first thing you always do is you look for a GCF. And so problems like that would be 2x squared minus 8x. And so for this one, my GCF would be a 2x. And so I'm left with x minus 4. And then let's say I have negative 3x squared plus 4x. For this one, the only number I can take out of a -3 and a +4 is a -1, but they each get an x. And remember, whenever this leading number is negative, you must take out the negative. Okay, so now I'm left with 3x minus 4. Okay, the next type you have is if you have trinomials. So something like x squared. I guess I don't need to number that too. So look for a GCF. I'm going to try and do this. So if you don't have 3 sections, make 3 sections. If I did make up other sections, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so we're going to squeeze in 3 examples here. So the first example is x squared plus 7x plus 12. And remember, I write down my factors of 12. And I look for ones that add to give me 7. And so that's with 3 and 4. And the only way I can get a +7 is if they're both positive. And then let's say I have x squared minus 8x minus 20. So my factors of 20. Let's subtract to give me an 8. Well, that's going to be a 2 with a 10. And the only way I can actually get a -8 is if my bigger number's negative. And then let's try one more. X squared plus x minus 12. So 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So I'm looking for the factors that subtract to give me a 1. Let's change that color. So remember that there's a 1 there. Okay? And so my factors that subtract to give me 1 are 3 and 4. So I'm going to put a 3 and a 4. And since this middle number is positive, my bigger number is positive. Okay, the last problem that we were factoring is one where we had a polynomial, a trinomial with 3 terms, but there was nothing I could take out of each of those. So remember what we had to do was we had to multiply the first and the last number, and that would give me 30. And so I wrote my factors of 30. And I'm looking for ones that subtract to give me a 1. And so that's these. So I bring down the 2x squared, and I bring down the minus 15. But then remember, now what I do is I'm going to put my 5x and my 6x here. And we have to figure out what signs they are. In order to get a -1, it must be a -6. Okay? And then the next step was for us to draw our parentheses around them. So we got a parentheses there, and then a parentheses here. And then I take out GCFs. Let's go gray. And so the only thing that goes into this first one, 2x squared and 5x, is just an x. And when I take out an x, I'm left with 2x plus 5. In this second one, let's change colors again. How about purple? Let's find a new color. Here, I can actually take out a -3, and it must be a negative because this first thing's negative, so I have to take out a negative. And so now I'm left with 2x. -15 divided by -3 is a +5. If you notice, I have my parentheses are the same. And when your parentheses are the same, that means that you did it right. Okay? And so my answer is going to be 2x plus 5. And then the other answer is these things in front. And x minus 3. I kind of ran out of room below, but maybe you have space there. If you would have wrote a -6x and then a 5x over here, your process would have changed, but you would have gotten the same parentheses. Okay? And so that's it for factoring.